My name is Emily Carter, and I had just turned 27 when the night came that changed everything. If I close my eyes, I can still hear the weight of those words echoing in my parents' living room, still feel the sting of the rejection, and still remember the burning shame that filled my chest. That night wasn't just another family argument. It was the night my own blood cut me out of their world and branded me a failure. My father, Richard Carter, had built his identity around being the successful patriarch of our small town. He was the kind of man who never missed a chance to remind everyone that he was the reason our family was respected. My mother, Linda Carter, followed closely behind him, always concerned with appearances, always comparing us siblings to make sure we reflected the perfect image she wanted the world to see. Then there were my siblings. Michael, my older brother, was their golden child. At 30, he carried himself like a king even though he'd never worked a real day in his life. Everything he had was handed to him: cars, investments, a position in my father's business. My younger sister, Samantha, was the darling of the family, 23 and obsessed with her social media following. My parents doted on her, praising her beauty, her charm, her so-called potential, even though she never lifted a finger to contribute to the family legacy. And then there was me, Emily, the middle child, the disappointment. I wasn't like Michael, who knew how to charm my parents with fake confidence. I wasn't like Samantha, who could bat her lashes and win over anyone. I was the one who questioned things, the one who didn't settle for the safe path my parents tried to lay out for me. I dropped out of graduate school to pursue something different: finance, business, money on my own terms. To them, that was the ultimate betrayal. That evening, we were all gathered in the living room after dinner. I had spent the last few weeks buried in research, learning everything I could about investment strategies, startups, and markets. I wanted to share my vision with them, hoping, naively, that maybe they'd see I wasn't lost, that I had a plan. "Dad, Mom," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been working on something. I know I didn't take the path you wanted, but I've been studying finance and I think I can build something real, something that could." I didn't even get to finish my sentence. My father slammed his glass down on the table, the sound cutting through my words like a blade. "Enough, Emily," he snapped. His voice carried the kind of finality that left no room for argument. "You've embarrassed this family enough already. You walked away from law school, from your responsibilities, from everything we gave you. And now you expect us to believe you're going to succeed where people far smarter than you have failed." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Michael leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Come on, Emily," he said mockingly. "You really think you're going to outsmart Wall Street? You couldn't even finish grad school." Samantha let out a laugh, that cruel, sharp laugh only sisters know how to deliver. "She's probably going to waste whatever little money she has on some scam and then come crawling back here." My mother didn't laugh, but her silence was worse. She just looked at me with that familiar expression of disappointment, lips pressed tight, as if she were embarrassed for me. I felt my face burn. My chest tightened with humiliation, but underneath that shame, something else stirred: anger. "Why can't you just believe in me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why is it always Michael this, Samantha that? Why is it so impossible to think that I might actually succeed at something?" My father's eyes hardened. "Because you're reckless," he said coldly. "Because you don't listen. Because you have no discipline. We can't afford to waste more time or money on your foolish dreams." He leaned forward, his voice dropping like a gavel delivering a sentence. "You are no longer part of this family's business. From this day on, you're on your own." The words sliced through me. I looked around the room, desperate for someone, anyone, to stand up for me. Michael was grinning like he'd just won a competition. Samantha rolled her eyes, already scrolling on her phone. My mother avoided my gaze, staring instead at the polished hardwood floor. It was in that silence that I realized the truth. They had all chosen to shut me out. I stood up, trying to keep my hands from trembling. "Fine," I whispered. "If that's how you feel, then I'll leave." Michael chuckled. "Good luck with your little business, sis. We'll see you back here in 6 months when you've got nothing left." I turned toward the door, but before I left, I looked back at them one last time. "You think I'm weak," I said, my voice steadier now. "You think I'm going to fail. But one day, you'll regret this." I walked out of that house with nothing but a small suitcase and a heart that felt like it was being ripped in two. But as I stepped into the cold night air, the tears streaming down my face, something shifted inside me. That night, I wasn't just the daughter who got shut out. I wasn't just the sister they laughed at. I wasn't just the failure they branded me to be. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would rise. I would build something bigger than they could ever imagine. And when the time came, I would make them see exactly who they had thrown away. It was the night they shut me out. It was also the night I began my empire. The night I walked out of my parents' house, I had nothing but a small suitcase, a few $100s in my bank account, and a determination I'd never felt before. I didn't have their support. I didn't have their money, and I didn't have a place in their carefully curated family image anymore. But what I did have was the hunger to prove them wrong. The next few weeks were brutal. I rented a tiny studio apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place where the paint peeled from the walls and the heater rattled all night long. I slept on a thrift store mattress that dipped in the middle, ate dollar store pasta for dinner, and worked double shifts at a coffee shop just to cover the bills. On the surface, it looked like I was sinking. But underneath, something was happening. I was quietly building the foundation of a new life. Every night after work, when most people would collapse from exhaustion, I opened my battered laptop and taught myself. I read everything I could find: finance blogs, ebooks, online courses, even old PDFs of textbooks I managed to download for free. I watched hours of YouTube videos about investing, stock markets, and business strategy. At first, it was overwhelming. The graphs, the numbers, the jargon that seemed like a foreign language. But I forced myself to push through. It hit me one night, staring at a chart of compound interest. Money wasn't just paper or numbers on a screen. Money was a language, and like any language, you had to practice it to become fluent. My parents had never taught me that. They had locked me out of the family business before I could even learn how it worked. But now I was teaching myself, line by line, term by term. And with every new concept I mastered, I felt a spark of power flicker inside me. During the day, I became more disciplined than I had ever been. I cut out every unnecessary expense. No more takeout coffee, no more new clothes, no more nights out with friends. Every spare dollar I saved went into a small brokerage account I had opened. At first, it was laughable, $20 here, $50 there. But watching those numbers slowly grow gave me a sense of control I had never felt before. I learned about budgeting apps, tracking every cent I spent. I started keeping a notebook filled with my goals: save $1,000 by the end of the month, invest in one index fund this quarter, read 3 books on financial psychology. I checked those goals off one by one, and each time I did, it was like I was erasing a little bit of the shame my family had poured onto me. One night, as I sat cross-legged on my thin mattress, I opened my notebook and wrote in big letters, "Knowledge is my revenge." Because it was. I realized that my family's entire power had come from money. My father commanded respect because he held the purse strings. My brother felt invincible because he knew he'd inherit the business. My mother and sister flaunted their lifestyle because it was funded by my father's wealth. And me? I was invisible because I had nothing. If I wanted to rewrite the script, I needed to take away their advantage. I needed to make money my weapon, my shield, and my voice. Slowly, my confidence grew. I started small, investing in safe, long-term stocks. Then I experimented with riskier plays, learning how to manage wins and losses without panicking. I joined online forums under anonymous usernames, asking questions, sharing ideas, and learning from people who had been in the game far longer than me. The internet became my classroom, my secret university, one my parents couldn't strip away. But it wasn't just about money, it was about mindset. I had to train myself to think differently. I learned patience, discipline, and resilience. I learned to keep my emotions in check when a stock dipped and not to get carried away when it soared. I learned that the market didn't reward desperation, it rewarded strategy. And somewhere in the quiet of those long nights, I began to feel something new. Hope. Not the fragile kind I used to carry, the hope that maybe one day my parents would approve of me. This was different. This was the kind of hope that came from knowing I was building something real, something that no one could take away from me. Of course, the loneliness was heavy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was delusional, if maybe Michael was right and I'd come crawling back home with nothing. But then I'd look at my notebook, at the tiny progress I had made, and I'd remind myself, empires aren't built overnight. It was during this period that I developed what I later called my financial fluency. I could read balance sheets like they were novels. I could predict market trends better than some of the so-called experts on TV. I could spot opportunities where others saw risks. And each skill I mastered was like another brick laid in the foundation of the empire I was determined to build. I also started to notice something else. People around me, coworkers, friends, even customers at the coffee shop, began asking me for advice. They knew I was into finance, and soon I was helping them create budgets, set savings goals, and understand their own money. The more I helped, the more I realized this could become more than just a side passion. This could become a business. One evening, as I closed my laptop after finishing yet another online course, I caught my reflection in the dark screen. I looked exhausted, dark circles under my eyes, hair tied back in a messy bun, hoodie hanging loose on my shoulders. But for the first time in years, I didn't see a failure. I saw a woman who was learning to fight back, one calculation at a time. My parents thought shutting me out was the end of my story. They thought without their money, I'd collapse. But what they didn't understand was that sometimes being thrown into the fire is the only way to learn how to forge steel. By the time 6 months had passed, I wasn't the same Emily they had discarded. I wasn't begging to come home, like Michael had predicted. I wasn't crawling back in shame, like Samantha had mocked. I was quietly, patiently, learning the language of money, and one day soon, I was going to be fluent enough to rewrite the entire story of who held the power in our family. That night in my cold little apartment, I wrote another promise in my notebook. They used money to shut me out. I'll use money to take everything back. And deep down, I knew I was only just getting started. By the time a year had passed since the night my family shut me out, my life looked completely different. I was still living in the same cramped apartment, still eating cheap meals, still wearing the same handful of thrift store clothes. But behind the scenes, everything was shifting. The money I had saved and invested was finally starting to show returns. My brokerage account balance wasn't huge, but it was growing steadily. More importantly, I had developed a reputation among the people around me. At the coffee shop where I worked, customers would strike up conversations with me about budgeting, investments, or credit cards. I'd pull out a napkin and sketch out a plan for them, and the gratitude in their eyes gave me a rush. That's when the idea struck me. If I could help strangers for free, why couldn't I turn this into something bigger? I started offering financial consulting on the side. At first, it was small. Friends of friends who wanted help creating budgets or figuring out how to save for a car or pay off debt. I charged almost nothing, maybe $50 for a full consultation, but I poured my heart into it. Word spread. Soon, I was meeting people in libraries, coffee shops, and even their living rooms, helping them untangle the knots of their finances. Every client was a lesson. Some were drowning in student loans, some were buried under credit card debt, and some just didn't know where their money went each month. What shocked me most was how many people lived in quiet shame, afraid to talk about their financial struggles. I realized then that money wasn't just numbers on a page, it was emotional. It was identity. It was survival. I leaned into that understanding and used it to grow. I started a simple website, just a free template with my name, a photo, and a tagline, helping you take control of your money, one step at a time. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me legitimacy. Within months, I had a steady stream of clients. The $50 consultations turned into $200 sessions, and eventually, monthly retainers. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. But I wasn't content with one-on-one consulting. I knew there was more. I wanted to scale. That's when I began working on my first real venture, a budgeting app. The idea came from watching my clients struggle with existing tools. Most apps were either too complicated or too simplistic. I envisioned something clean, intuitive, and empowering, an app that didn't just track money but taught people how to manage it. I sketched wireframes in my notebook, mapped out user journeys, and taught myself enough coding basics to create a prototype. Of course, I couldn't do it alone. I found a small team of freelancers online, developers, designers, and even a copywriter. I couldn't afford to pay them much, but I convinced them with passion and a promise. If the app succeeded, they'd share in the profits. They believed me. For months, I lived on black coffee and instant noodles while we built the app. I worked at the coffee shop by day, consulted clients by evening, and coded late into the night. There were days I felt like my body was giving out, but every time I thought about quitting, I remembered the smirk on Michael's face, the silence of my mother, the cruel laugh of Samantha. Their voices became fuel. When we finally launched the app, I didn't expect much. I shared it with my clients, posted about it in a few finance forums, and prayed it wouldn't flop. To my shock, it took off. Within a month, we had thousands of downloads. Within 6 months, it was featured on finance blogs and recommended by influencers. By the end of the year, the app had crossed 100,000 users. The revenue wasn't massive at first, but it was steady. More importantly, it gave me credibility. Suddenly, I wasn't just Emily, the dropout. I was Emily Carter, founder of a financial tech startup. Investors started reaching out. Interviews followed. My name began circulating in spaces I'd only dreamed of before. With the profits from the app, I diversified. I bought my first rental property, a rundown duplex on the outskirts of town. Friends called me crazy, said it was too much risk, but I had run the numbers 100 times. I renovated one unit, rented it out, and watched the cash flow start trickling in. Then I bought another property, and another. Slowly, my portfolio grew. At the same time, I doubled down on my investments. I didn't chase trends. I focused on steady, long-term growth. Blue-chip stocks, index funds, and eventually, shares in promising startups. Each move was calculated. Each dollar I earned was put to work. I was no longer the girl my family mocked. I was a businesswoman, an investor, a founder, and with every step forward, the distance between me and them widened. But here's the part that mattered most. I didn't just grow richer in money. I grew richer in self-respect. For the first time, I looked in the mirror and saw someone who was in control. Someone powerful. Someone who had built herself from the ground up. By year 3, my net worth crossed into 7 figures. My app had expanded into new markets, my consulting business had a waiting list, and my real estate portfolio was growing faster than I had imagined. My name was starting to appear in industry publications, Forbes, Business Insider, Entrepreneur. And yet, through all of it, I never forgot the night my family shut me out. Their voices lived in my head, not as wounds anymore, but as reminders. Every deal I signed, every property I purchased, every headline that featured my name, it was all proof that they had been wrong. Brick by brick, I was building an empire. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before they would see it. What I didn't know then was just how soon that moment would come, or how desperate they would be when it did. By the time I was 30, the life my family had once mocked me for chasing had become my reality. My consulting business was thriving, my budgeting app had reached nearly 500,000 downloads, and my real estate portfolio stretched across 3 states. I had gone from the girls scraping together dollar store meals to the women signing 6-figure contracts in boardrooms. But the true satisfaction didn't come from the money. It came from the quiet moments, when I walked past the Carter family name engraved on the office building downtown and realized I no longer needed their approval. When I signed a deed and knew it was my signature, not my father's, that carried weight. When I woke up every morning without fear of being cut off, because no one could cut me off anymore. And then, just when I thought I had finally detached from them, the tables turned. It started with a rumor. A colleague of mine, who kept tabs on local businesses, mentioned casually over lunch that Carter and Sons Manufacturing, the family company my father had built his entire identity around, was in trouble. At first, I didn't believe it. My father was too proud, too meticulous, to let cracks show. But curiosity gnawed at me, and I began digging. What I found was worse than I expected. The company's financial statements revealed mountains of debt. Contracts had been mismanaged. Assets had been liquidated to cover losses. My brother Michael, now vice president, had made reckless investments that bled the company dry. And my father, in his arrogance, had refused to modernize or adapt to new technology. The empire they had once used to shut me out was crumbling. Within months, the rumors became headlines. Carter and Sons facing bankruptcy. Leadership crisis in one of the city's oldest companies. I clipped every article and saved them, not out of cruelty, but because each one was living proof of what I had always known. The empire was built on arrogance, not resilience. Then came the call. It was a cold January morning when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered, expecting a client, but instead, I heard my father's voice, strained, weary, and trembling in a way I had never heard before. "Emily," he said, pausing as if the name itself was difficult to speak. We need to talk." I froze. In all the years since they had shut me out, not once had my father reached out. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even when my name began appearing in the business press. And now, here he was, calling me. I didn't reply right away, so he continued. "The company, it's in trouble. We made some mistakes. Your brother," his voice broke. "We can't fix it alone. We need help. We need you." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp to ignore. The same man who had told me I was reckless, undisciplined, and useless was now asking for my help. The same family that had mocked me, dismissed me, and cast me out was now looking at me as their last resort. For a long moment, I said nothing. I let the silence stretch until it became heavy. Then I said softly, "I thought I was no longer part of this family's business." He inhaled sharply, and for the first time in my life, I heard humility in his tone. "We were wrong, Emily. I was wrong. You've built something incredible, and we need that strength. Please." That word, please, from my father's mouth felt like the earth shifting beneath my feet. Over the next few days, the calls multiplied. My mother left tearful voicemails, apologizing for not defending me when I needed her. Samantha sent desperate texts, begging me to meet. Even Michael, the brother who had always treated me like a joke, called with a voice stripped of its arrogance. "Emily," he said, "you're the only one who can save us." And that's when I realized the tables had finally turned. I wasn't the failure anymore. I wasn't the daughter sitting in the corner, desperate for scraps of approval. I was the one holding the cards. At first, I wrestled with it. Part of me still carried the hurt of their rejection. Part of me wanted to slam the phone down, to tell them I owed them nothing, to savor the taste of revenge. But another part of me, the strategist I had become, saw an opportunity. I began to imagine it. Walking into their boardroom, the place where they had laughed at me, and sitting at the head of the table, watching their faces as they realized that useless daughter had become the very lifeline they needed. But I didn't want to just help them survive. No, that would have been mercy. I wanted to own them. So, I called my lawyers and financial advisors. I laid out a plan. If I were to step in, it would be on my terms. Complete buyout. Transfer of ownership. Every asset, every contract, every inch of the company would belong to me. The negotiations took weeks, and with every meeting, I watched the Carter family shrink. My father's proud shoulders sagged lower. My mother's polished poise cracked into desperation. Michael's cocky smirk vanished, replaced by the nervous tick of someone about to lose everything. Samantha barely spoke, her once bright confidence dulled. And me? I sat across from them, calm, composed, powerful. There were moments when guilt tried to creep in, but I reminded myself of the night they shut me out, of the tears I shed in that cold apartment, of the hunger, the exhaustion, the loneliness. They had left me to drown, and now they were begging me for a lifeboat. By the time the contracts were signed, it was official. Carter and Sons Manufacturing, the company that had defined my family for generations, was mine. The tables hadn't just turned. They had flipped entirely. For the first time, my father wasn't the head of the family legacy. I was. And as I looked at the ink drying on the final page, I knew exactly what came next. The moment of reckoning. The revenge I had dreamed about since that night was finally within reach. The day of the first official board meeting under my ownership arrived like a storm I had been waiting years to unleash. I dressed carefully that morning, not in the plain hoodies and scuffed sneakers I had worn when my family last saw me, but in a sharp black suit tailored to perfection. My heels clicked against the marble floors of the Carter and Sons headquarters as I walked into the building that had once been a fortress I was never allowed to enter. Every employee I passed looked at me with curiosity, some with recognition. My name had been in the headlines for months now. Emily Carter buys out Carter and Sons, from disgrace to CEO. The whispers followed me down the hall. When I stepped into the boardroom, I paused for just a moment to take it in. The long mahogany table, the leather chairs, the giant family crest on the wall, embossed with the words Carter and Sons. This was the room where decisions had been made about my future without me. The room where I had once been dismissed as worthless. And now, it was mine. My family was already seated, waiting. My father sat at the far end, his once commanding posture reduced to a weary slump. His hair had grayed more than I remembered, and his eyes no longer held the fire of authority, only defeat. My mother sat beside him, her makeup perfect but her face lined with worry. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, no trace of his old arrogance left. Samantha avoided my eyes altogether, scrolling her phone nervously, though I doubted she was actually reading anything. I walked to the head of the table, the seat my father had always claimed as his own, and placed my leather folder in front of me. Slowly, deliberately, I sat down. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. "Let's begin," I said, my voice steady, calm, but edged with steel. The silence was suffocating. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Emily," he said, his voice strained, "we know things haven't been easy between us, but now that you're here, maybe we can." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "No," I said flatly. "We are not here to pretend the past didn't happen. We're here to establish the future. My future, the company's future, and your new roles in it." Michael frowned. "Roles?" I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. "Yes, as of today, Carter and Sons is no longer a family-run company. It's mine. The paperwork you signed made that clear. But I believe in second chances, so I'm offering you all something." Their eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. I let the pause stretch before delivering the blow. "You may stay, but not as leaders, not as owners. You'll stay as employees." The color drained from Michael's face. "Employees," he spat. "Yes," I said coolly. "Michael, you'll report to the new CFO, entry-level financial analyst. Consider it training in actual responsibility, something you've never had." His fists clenched, but he didn't speak. I turned to my mother. Linda, you'll remain in PR. Not as head, but as an assistant. Scheduling, calls, calendar management. You always cared about appearances. Let's see how well you handle them when the image isn't yours to control." Her lips trembled, but she nodded faintly. I shifted my gaze to Samantha. "As for you, you'll work in customer service. Phones, emails, complaints. Every day, you'll hear the voices of the people this company ignored while you posted selfies. Maybe it'll teach you something about humility." Samantha's mouth fell open. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." Finally, I looked at my father, the man who had once been untouchable, the man who had thrown me out without a second thought. "And you, Richard," I said softly, almost tenderly, "you'll stay too. Not as CEO, not as president. You'll be an advisor, on paper only. No authority, no decision-making power. Just a title and a desk in the corner, a relic of what this company used to be." His jaw tightened, his eyes glistening with something that might have been tears. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as a towering figure of dominance, but as a man brought low by his own arrogance. "You can't do this," Michael whispered. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I already did." The room went silent again. I let the weight of my words settle, then continued. "Understand this. I didn't buy this company because I wanted to save you. I bought it because I wanted to prove something. You thought shutting me out would break me. You thought I'd come crawling back. But look around. Who's crawling now?" No one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I stood, gathering my folder. "This company will rise again, but it will rise under my name. Emily Carter. Remember it. Etch it into your minds. Because from this moment on, I am the empire you dismissed. I am the legacy you tried to erase." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back one last time. "And make no mistake," I added, my voice dropping into a razor edge. "This isn't forgiveness. This is revenge. You wanted me gone. Instead, I own you." Their faces burned into my memory. My father's humiliation, my mother's quiet shame, my brother's fury, my sister's disbelief. It was everything I had once dreamed of. But standing there, I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had transcended it. I left the boardroom without looking back, the sound of my heels echoing like thunder down the hallway. The employees I passed straightened as I walked by. Some nodded. Some whispered. All of them knew the truth. The empire they had tried to keep from me was gone. The empire I built was here to stay. And for the first time, I felt it fully, the sweet, unshakable taste of victory. The night they shut me out had been my beginning. This day, in this boardroom, was my revenge, and it was stronger than anything they could have imagined.